Question number 2, Metiria Turei.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou i te whare. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements?
Mr. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Does the Prime Minister still consider that the number of children in low decile schools who, quote, actually require lunch is the odd 1 or 2, end quote?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, the member would have to go back to the full interview that she's quoting from, and I don't think that's a direct quote, but what I did say was that the vast bulk of youngsters actually do come to school with lunch, and I stand by that statement.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
How can it possibly be true that only the odd 1 or 2 kids in low decile schools need lunch, when since the beginning of this year alone, 1,000 more children have joined Kids Can waiting list, meaning 7,500 children are now waiting for Kids Can's help?
Mr Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, the member's starting point of the member's question is wrong, and she knows it's wrong because I just corrected it in the first answer. But putting that to one side, Mr Speaker, actually this is the government that's supported Kids Can. This is the government that's enabled it to have more resources to do the very good work that Julie Helson does.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister still think that the number of kids in low decile schools who require lunch is still just the odd 1 or 2, when 9 schools in Northland are now on the waiting list for help from Kids Can?
Well,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, the member obviously has a hearing problem because she didn't hear the answer to the first question or the second one. I know, that's right, she just likes to make things up as she goes along, which actually destroys her own argument. If you can't come up with decent stats that actually stack up or decent quotes, by definition you defeat your own argument.
Point of order, sir.
Order. Supplementary question.
Point of order.
Point of order, Metiria Turei.
So my question was explicitly about the 9 schools in Northland who are now on the Kids Can waiting list, and the Prime Minister did not address that question.
Order. That wasn't a specific question. The question also included an opening comment. Does the Prime Minister still think the numbers involved are just simply 1 or 2? And that was the part the Prime Minister certainly addressed in his answer. Supplementary question?
Supplementary.
Metiria Turei.
Will the Prime Minister commit to spending just a fraction of the cost of the 10 new Northland bridges on the 9 Northland schools so that the children in those schools can have a lunch to eat every day?
Mr Speaker,
Yeah, Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think it's important to understand what the government does spend, which is billions and billions and billions of dollars a year supporting low-income families and low-income New Zealanders. But one thing I do know is a stronger roading infrastructure in Northland under a national-led government will lead to stronger job growth. We already saw the GDP numbers for Northland this year as very, very strong. We know 7,500 jobs have been created in Northland in the last 12 months. We know this government has spent $750 million in roading over the last 7 years in Northland, 40% more than Labor, Mr Speaker. And actually, even on this side of the House, we're in the slightly novel form of we know which candidate we're going to vote for.
Point of order.
Order. Order. Order.
Point of order.
Order. This is a point of order. Metiria Turei.
Sir, my question asked the Prime Minister whether he would commit to new funding for the 9 Northland schools whose kids go without lunch every day. He did not address that question.
Again, can I invite the member to carefully look at her question after question time? She included a statement around a fraction of what was being spent on the bridges announcement that was made yesterday or used in the House yesterday by the government. The government addressed that. He also addressed spending on education. The question was addressed. Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Prime Minister vote for the Feed the Kids bill in Parliament next week so that all political parties can work with experts to develop the best legislative solution so that all of our kids are being fed at school?
Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, no, and no for a very good reason, because the vast majority of kids are actually fed by their parents. Their parents, irrelevant of their economic circumstances, actually do a very good job of providing breakfast and lunch, and the government would far rather direct those resources on a targeted basis to those in need. The government already supports breakfast in schools. 791 schools, I'm advised, out of the 2,500 schools approximately in New Zealand take up breakfast in schools in some part, and I think the government's got its targeted in the right direction.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Well then, will he at least commit to his government working with a cross-party agreement to provide food in schools, given that Kids Can says that 23% on average and up to 90% of kids in schools are going without lunch every day?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I look forward to the quote from Julie that says that 90% of kids going to school in the 2,550 schools approximately in New Zealand are going without lunch. I hate to tell the member, but I reckon I've been to way more schools than she ever has. I am a prolific visitor to schools in the 7 years I've been Prime Minister. I tell you what, in the 500 odd schools I've been to, if 90% of them didn't have lunch, I'd be pretty surprised, because I tell you what, I've seen a lot of them munching their way through lots and lots of lunches. If the member wants to come with me to a school, and I'll name the school, and 90% of them don't have lunch, I personally will buy them lunch for the whole year.
Order.
Supplementary question, Metiria.
Point of order.
Order.
I'd like to take the Prime Minister up on his invitation.
Order. I'm not in a position. I'm not in a position yet to hear the point of order. Point of order.
I would like to take the Prime Minister up on his invitation.
And that is not a point of order. The member's welcome to communicate with the Prime Minister later. Question number 3, Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My